Hello, Renegade Marketers. Welcome to Renegade Marketers Unite, the top-rated podcast for B2B CMOs and other marketing-obsessed individuals. You're about to listen to a recording of Renegade Marketers Live, our live show featuring the CMOs of CMO Huddles, a community that's sharing, caring, and daring each other to greatness every day of the week. This time, we've got a conversation with Katrina Klier of Pros, Kevin Briody of Edmentum, and Mika Yamamoto of F5 about the 2021 lessons they were bringing into 2022, with insights that are as relevant today as they were at the beginning of the year into topics like content, recruiting, MarTech, metrics, and more. It's a great episode. Let's dive in. First up, let's bring on Katrina Klier, CMO of Pros, the publicly traded leader in SaaS, CPQ, that's configure, price and quote, and price optimization. Hello, Katrina. How are you?
I'm well, Drew. Thank you so much for having me today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Since this is your first CMO role, let's talk about what have been the biggest surprises for you thus far.
This is my first full company CMO role, so that's kind of exciting, having done different senior leadership and CMO-like roles at big companies and different parts of it. I have to say it's a pleasant surprise, is how thoughtful Pros was about what they really needed in their next CMO and how much thought they put into having a CMO that would be at the center of their growth strategy and what kind of person and background would be most helpful for that. So that's been nice. That was part of the whole conversation while interviewing, and it's been really nice to see that hold true now that I've been there several months. I think and how welcoming from the executive team right down to every single person in the company has been incredibly welcoming, not just polite, but genuinely welcoming. And you just don't find that a lot of places. I think it's a testament to the company and the executive team at Pros.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we talk a lot about in huddles is the importance of the CEO, CMO alignment. And it sounds like they hired you. They were very clear about what it is that they expected from you. And the good news is those are things that you're good at. That is a good news, because it can be that awkward, oh gosh, I'm in the wrong place, or they don't know what they want from me and I don't know what they want. And so that sounds all good. I know, look, there must have been something where you said, okay, I didn't see this coming.
I don't know if there really was any of that. Other than honestly having moved to different companies throughout my career, and I've been fortunate to work for some really fantastic ones, and really just the openness of people at Pros. Because the interviewing as a CMO is no small thing. Making sure you have alignment across the executive team with the CEO and also with the board for what you're going to come in and do when you get there. And sometimes those conversations seem like they've gone one way when you're interviewing, and then sometimes they can be different when you get there and you wonder what happened in between. But thankfully, this has not been that case. It's really been a chance to come in and try to drive a growth strategy and put some things in place and work really well across the rest of the executive team. We're pleasantly well connected into the sales organization and the product organization. And I feel like that's kind of a gift. Most of the time I've had to build all those connections when I've taken a new job.
And so let's talk a little bit about then. So what's happened for the first 10 months? You talk about putting things in place. Let's put some meat on that bone.
Well, I would say I came in, and one of the first things we were going to do as a company was a sizable platform launch. And Pros had been without a CMO for many months before I joined the company. And so it's difficult to do a really effective launch when you haven't had a CMO at the helm for most of the planning, right? So that was a little bit of, okay, we're going to do a launch. Let's make sure we make it really a great one, and that we don't just meet, but we exceed the aspirations of this endeavor as a company. So getting that put together with a team who had just met me, literally just got there, and had not seen me other than through a Zoom lens and those kinds of things, was an interesting challenge. But I'm really proud of the team coming together and within marketing and in other parts of the company for how we really pulled that launch off well. But that also helped me see places where We need a few more skills here. We need to rebalance the team some there. We need to make sure we're plugged in a little bit better here. And it gave me a very rapid view of that, stop, start, continue list that we all build when we start a new job.
Right. And that's interesting. So there's this ongoing project, and because that project has to get done, in the process, you get to see and assess, which is kind of interesting, because otherwise you're just sort of assessing on a theoretical level. Here you can see in practice what worked and what didn't. So let's talk a little bit about, how did you get to know your team 100%? Since you're still 100% remote, right?
No, we travel some for work.
Okay.
We're in the same, once in a while we're in the same place, but yeah, not every day.
So, so have you actually physically met every member of your team?
Oh, no.
Okay. And so that's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. It is. I have to say, I've worked in such geographically distributed teams for so long that it really wasn't that different in many ways, and yet it was completely different in some ways then too. I think some of that because of COVID, but I always just feel like you have to just find a way. You have to remember that at the end of the day, we're all people, and make sure that you pause, just spend some time getting to know people. You just have to find a way in this world to try and make those connections, and make sure you take the time to make those connections. Usually by now I would have been on airplanes and been to every office and spent time with each parts of the team and literally gotten to know everyone, but that wasn't possible. And so I did I'm doing now an ongoing series. Everybody enjoyed them so much. CMO roundtables, which are really small group meetings of usually within the same time zone, so nobody's up in the middle of the night, but of the team. So we all fit within one gallery screen on your video call of choice platform. So everybody can see each other. People have a chance to talk, and we just talk about a whole series of different things. And it's nice. I get to know them. They get to know me. They get to know each other. We've hired a lot of people over the last 2 years, and many of them haven't met each other other than through a video call, and haven't always met people in teams they don't work with immediately every day across the marketing org. So it's been a really nice chance for us to get to know each other. Everybody loved the first round so much. We're just gonna keep doing them. So
keep doing them. So is there one thing that you did this year that kind of worked better than expected, and one thing that didn't, just since this is a show about lessons learned?
I think the platform launch went better than I expected it to. Launching the pros platform, I will say this is the first time I took a job, and on day 2, it's like, okay, we're going to do a major product launch, and I was still trying to get to know the product. So that was an interesting adventure. It went better than I thought it was going to. So that was really, really nice. On the flip side of that, we've had generally pretty good results from what I can see across virtual events. Over the last 2 years, but even before, everybody had to flip everything to virtual. And that got a little harder this year as fatigue set in for people. We were trying to do a mix of on-location events, virtual events, and hybrid events as everything unfolded, and trying to keep pace with the change of what you can do and can't do and what people are comfortable doing, and how do you make it all meaningful and get the results out of it for everyone involved. That's been hard this year. I think we've learned a lot and had some good results, but it's
right.
Definitely been hard.
Yeah. And I think we'll come back to digital fatigue, but let's bring on Kevin Briody, VP of Global Marketing at the Center for Creative Leadership. We'll call it CCL for short. Hello, Kevin. So CCL is in the executive leadership business. I'm imagining that last 2 years may have been like transformative. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, well, for us in particular, the whole industry went through a lot, but I think for us, it was a big change, and just a real, we've been around for 50 plus years. Actually, about a year ago was our 50th anniversary. For us, it's the hallmark of what we do has always been these really powerful in-person training experiences. You come for a couple of days or a week to one of our campuses, you interact with a really interesting cohort of peers, and you go through this really, intense leadership development experience. But that was really the bulk of our business. Then, obviously March 2020 in-person face-to-face events that required a lot of travel, particularly international travel, all of a sudden really didn't become very viable. So that was a huge shift for us. Really overnight, a good chunk of our business had to change. And that was an all hands on deck. We had all the right content and the right experiences, and the customer relationships were really strong. It was just a question of making sure we could replicate those same experiences through what everyone else in the world was shifting to at that point, which was through Zoom and Teams and all these virtual experiences. From a marketing front, we were just not known as a brand for, really compelling virtual learning experiences. So that was, for my whole team, that was a huge challenge, was working with our product teams and our faculty and everyone to really kind of build our awareness amongst our customers that this is something we offer, and actually we're quite good at it. So yeah, that was a pretty intense, we call them heat experiences, trial by fire. That was a pretty intense heat experience.
Yeah. And so I'm imagining that you worked out a lot of those wrinkles and challenges and made the full conversion relatively quickly in 2020. What stands out for you about 2021?
Well, I think 2020 was the big pivot for many folks, and with mass uncertainty, I think for 2021 has been a continuation of that, almost a maturity of a lot of the processes and products and things we put in place in response to the initial pandemic, seeing a lot of growth. I think as a lot of our business came back quite quickly. It's been an interesting year too, in that, some of our business has been face-to-face has, always been a traditional part of how we do training. And some of that has actually been coming back, but, often ways mirroring the state of the pandemic, in that it comes in waves as the comfort level grows or vaccination rates go up and people are more willing to meet in person and safety protocols and all that mature. So it's been an interesting business as we've just really learned to live with it and adapt in it.
So let's cut in and bring on Mika. So Mika Yamamoto is the CMO and CXO of F5 and the star of episode 7 of this show and episode 184 of Renegade Marketers Unite. So hello officially, Mika.
Hello, good to see you.
Nice to see you. So, what worked really well for you in 2021?
I think what worked really well for us in 2021 was a continuity from where we were in 2020. Obviously, the whole world changed in 2020, and what we had decided to do as a business to help us with a core principle of how were we going to make our decisions about what we would do with customers, what we do with partners and in the community and our employees, was we were going to be human first. And it helped with that, just because as we dealt with trade-offs in terms of OpEx and what we were going to do for hiring, we thought, okay, what's the most humane and human thing to do here for our customers or for our employees? And it helped guide us. And we continued that mantra through 2021. So myself and our head of HR, who's Anna White, partnered even more strongly through 2021 through this human first approach. And how that helped was that we started to think about, look, how do we provide space for people? And that space in terms of mental space. As we see people get stressed, what do we do? And so we provided, and we started out doing a meetingless Wednesday. So we don't have meetings with each other. We only have meetings with external stakeholders on Wednesdays to be able to provide some relief and a difference in terms of how our days operate. We were really intentional about providing support. And so how do we provide support based on the different things that were popping through the planet? So, we sent oxygen to India, to, communities, as well as not just our employees, but to the community. When Israel was seeing a lot of tensions, war-torn tensions, we provided support to that community. So as we saw different elements pop throughout the world, rather than have a, United States-centric view, we wanted to make sure we recognized and were there for communities, and not just our own teams, but the communities where we operate, and to be able to help the communities. And so we let go of the commercial focus that we had, and we did so very, very authentically and very, very much just to help the community. We made a lot of relationships as a result, and we established a lot of great goodwill within the communities that we work within. So we're really happy about, providing space for our own teams, providing support for our own teams, as well as our communities, which has really helped out. And then also just within our own employee base, as we know, it's just been a really taxing set of years. And so we're putting out programs like mental health first aid and rolling that out to all of our, to all of our senior leaders here at F5, so to make sure that we can support our own teams and support our customers and support our partners in the best way possible so that we can keep forging ahead as we have probably no real end in sight to this hybrid environment. So that's worked really well for us.
Wow. Okay. There's so many things to unpack there, but I'm just going to put some punctuation points on them. I love No Meeting Wednesday. We had 4 huddles this month on time management, and meetings became the #1 issue. And so there were lots of conversations about fewer meetings, better meetings, shorter meetings. And I also like the fact that it turns back to, but that's no internal meetings, but if we need to be externally facing, yeah, we're on for that day. I love the simplicity of space and support and thinking about that. One of the other biggest issues that came up in 2021 huddles was just employees, keeping them and finding them. Yeah. And so the fact that you all embraced this humanness, I'm imagining that you perhaps had a less departures than maybe your peers, and maybe it was easier to recruit as a result of that?
We're seeing the great resignation. I think in core areas, we are able to retain a lot of our key employees because of not just, what we do, but also who we are and who we are as a culture. So that's been great. It has been an incredible differentiator for us to be able to recruit, because we don't believe in making statements about how we help people. We believe in, our actions speaking louder than those words. So we don't write press releases when we give away our technology for, helping a university stay online or helping a hospital to be able to treat its patients remotely. But we do let our actions speak for us. And so that's helped a ton in terms of, because you can see through whether a company truly it does live by its values. And we do in our actions. And so that has helped us a lot in terms of recruiting, because that's a really big differentiator for us to be able to attract really incredible talent who, is in such high demand. And the premium that people are paying, as we all have seen on key marketing talent, is really extraordinary. So how we do our work, you can't just fabricate in the moment when you're losing a bunch of people. It's a history that you build, and it's a culture and ethos that you build. And so that's helped a ton in terms of recruiting for us.
And, I'm recalling a huddle conversation back in 2020. And I seem to recall, now these are of course confidential, someone in the group said, the less hard we sell, the more we seem to sell. And someone might have been you, that someone might have been someone else, but I'm wondering, in all this goodness here and this internal focus and this wellness and putting human forward, I'm imagining good things happened on the business front.
Yeah, they've helped us a lot. I mean, we have wellness days as well, and we've extended those to be long weekends every quarter for our employees. And so we had wellness days, once a month through the summer, and now we have 4-day weekends once a quarter for our employees. And people have been so happy to be out in the mountains biking or sitting on their couch reading that they've posted on social media that's what they're doing. And so we've actually had a lot of inbound requests to say, hey, if you ever have a job, we'd love to work with you. We've had customers comment, or former customers that have become, existing customers come back to us because they've said, look, we really appreciate how you work. So it really has been a really great way to engage in a way that isn't about selling, but definitely is about who we are. And I find that those connections are really what people are seeking and craving now. I mean, there's so much going on that finding this human connection where you can talk about something relatable, almost supersedes and is something that people crave in all conversations, whether it's talking about the latest technology or, talking about what school your kid needs to go to. So it's definitely helped drive a lot of conversations for us.
And I'm curious if any of that plays out, because one of the things that Katrina mentioned, and we've heard a lot in huddles in the last couple of months, is this notion of digital fatigue. I mean, within all of this, we all know we're tired of our Zoom meetings, we're Zoomed out, but we also know that our customers and our prospects are a little weary of another webinar or another virtual event. I'm curious, have you seen virtual fatigue in some of the things that you're doing, or have you been able to sort of find a way around that?
We have not found a way around it. I mean, we definitely have seen it. So we're thinking of, when we have events, how do we make sure they're interactive? When we have events, how do we make sure that we can land, content in smaller amounts of time rather than talking for 45 minutes, one speaker talking for 45 minutes on end. Something that we've realized works really well is a mix of the virtual world and the physical world. So we've sent paint kits to people and done virtual painting parties with team members and customers. We've had virtual poker nights, casino nights, where there actually is a physical table that someone is working behind. And then there's technology that works in the background to enable us to engage in a way that is less listening to someone talk at you and more engaging in a digital way with someone who's actually doing something physically. So people have really innovated a lot in terms of, the types of physical materials that you can send to somebody that then is a part of a virtual scenario, that makes the conversation richer and makes engagement richer, just because we're just not doing the same PowerPoint presentation of the same talking head talking at you. So we have seen a ton of digital fatigue, and we're just trying to make the moments that we have more meaningful and more interactive.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's going to be about not doing as much, but doing everything just a little bit better or more interesting or more fun than you did it last year, right?
It is. It really is.
Was there anything that you tried in 2021 that you'd say, yeah, it didn't work with, and maybe it's just, we got to move on, or anything that's on the, get that off the list?
Yeah, the list is long, personally, professionally. I think I've learned a lot as a human being, more than any other year in my life. But, the one thing that we're in this transformation of going from a hardware company to a software company, which means that how we market and sell is completely different, right? I mean, marketers at F5 used to be like, we arrange parties, we bring cookies to events. We're very traditional activity driven marketing organization previously, and now we're moving into marketing being on the hook to helping deliver revenues. And so in doing so, it's a move to use data, right? And that's a cultural shift. That's a huge shift in technology. And so we created a propensity model that essentially helped predict whether company X or company Y would be more likely to buy from F5 using first-party data and third-party data, which we were so happy we had this model, and we rolled it out, and no one used it. No one used it.
Oh my God. Wait. So you rolled it out and it didn't work, or it did work, but nobody used it?
It did work. No one used it.
Oh.
It was a notion of, but we didn't give up. So it's not something we ditched. It's something we said, well, why didn't it work? And it was a lot of actually a moment of, if we build it, they will come, which we know is never true. And so we realized and took a step back and said, look, this is a massive cultural shift, right? For a set of individuals who have relied on their own intuition and research to say, look, I'm going to rely on this machine to actually tell me which customer I should focus on. That's a massive gap. And we realized that's a cultural gap. That's an educational gap on understanding, how these things work. There was also the process piece was like, it wasn't a part of Salesforce. And so in the course of a seller's day, they would have to leave salesforce.com and leave Outlook and go somewhere else to go find it, which isn't really, as you try to optimize time, which ironically this tool was meant to do, we created one more step. And so we've taken a step back and said, look, how do we get a core set of super users who would be excited to use this? How do we incorporate this into salesforce.com and make it be part of the account planning tool? And then how do we actually drive like a white glove experience in terms of education and handholding through using this tool with a small subset of super users so that they can then see the value and then they tell two friends, et cetera. And so it's something that we're trying to apply because we were so sad. We're so excited for this model, and we were so sad that no one used it, that we decided to use a different approach to try to leverage more data in terms of what we do from a go-to-market standpoint.
And I'm so glad you shared that story, because it's such a classic one of, this is really smart stuff. We figured out a better way to help you sell. It's like ABM. But if we go to the Salesforce and say, okay, here are your 100 customers, go do it. And we don't get 2 or 3 that are on board and evangelists and outselling their buddies, it's never going to happen. And it's just like you sort of have to build a little beta for it and a trial program and get a few people excited. And then you've got to market the marketing in a way. But I'm so glad you shared it. But the other part of this is so interesting is that you know, if people are in an environment and you take them out, that's such an important observation, because so many times we think, oh, well, we'll get them somewhere else. And no, because you're having to change behavior, and having to change behavior, two behaviors is really hard, right? But one behavior, they're in Salesforce, so let's do it. Okay. Such a great story. Thank you for sharing that. All right, we're going to take a little bit of break. If you don't mind, I'm going to plug CMO Huddles for a second. We launched CMO Huddles in 2020 as an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as timely conversations with smart peers in a trusted environment, while another called it a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. If you're a B2B CMO that can share and care with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com or send me an email, drew@renegade.com, and see if you qualify for a guest pass. And Katrina, Kevin, Mika, you just heard this description of CMO Huddles. Does that jive with your experience?
You know, it does. I joined the Huddles group, Drew, right, I think a couple months after I started at Pros, and I found the peer mentoring part of it super helpful. Just the willingness and openness of the people in the organization to, like you said, share, care, and dare. It's inspiring. It is a little therapy at times, and it's just been incredibly helpful.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mika. If you want to share.
I agree with the Katrina. It is a moment to share. And you get to see whether you're absolutely on an island with an idea, or if you have commiseration on other people who are facing the same things, and it's good therapy. And what I love about it also is that if there's a topic that's top of mind for you, which you may feel like you're on an island on because you may be the only one that feels that way at your company, bringing it into the huddles is a great way to see whether people are seeing something similar, and chances are they are. And there's an amazing cross-section of individuals that may be in different industries with different experiences that can lend their support, or may have run into that before. And so that type of support is, I think, invaluable and a great part of the huddles.
Yeah,
go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I've been participating in the huddles for a number of months now, and everything that Mika and Katrina said, I think it's an incredible therapy, yes, but it's also one of those, you're not alone in going through a lot of the same challenges. For companies that can be smaller or vastly larger, are all going through similar challenges. So I think it's fascinating learning experience and kind of socializing challenges. The Slack channel, I think, is amazing. There's just some really helpful ideas and thoughts and things being shared in there as a backstop underneath the huddle actual meetings. So it's been a really useful tool for me.
That's awesome. It's really been exciting because in the last 3 months, the Slack channel has really come into its own. And I don't know if it's critical mass or just folks are sort of it's just there. All right. So let's get back to this, and let's sort of go around the horn. And what are you going to do differently in 2022? Kevin, you want to start?
It's interesting. When I originally was thinking about this, it was about this idea of starting to, gradually, potentially reinvest in face-to-face events. Less about trade shows, conferences, more about field events or experientials, smaller things that you could more tightly manage. I think there's still interest there, and I think there's still appetite. You're seeing a number of companies try it. Our fiscal starts in a quarter into the year next year, and that's going to be something we're starting to think about, which is there an appetite for that? What is the pandemic looking like at that point? Is it safe to do it? There does seem to be a lot of interest we're hearing from our clients and prospects out there in getting back in person and having those kinds of engagements and connections again. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on.
Okay, so being nimble remains there and agile. But so Mika, what's on your do differently for 2022?
I'd mentioned earlier that the thing that went well was that we are human first, and that's a very top line message of caring and connection that we want to maintain. And then we pivoted really hard on looking at data and metrics. And though the propensity model didn't work, we did put in place a ton of metrics to be able to track and manage, our pipeline, which is something that we hadn't done before. But I feel like in driving this top line and in driving all these metrics, we lost sight of really driving an emotional connection around the message around our products themselves. And so it's still maintaining this human first message. It's still having a big focus on the data, but really exercising more of the creative side of our brains and our hearts to create more of a connection with our products itself, and putting a ton of intention around what we're saying about our products and seeing if we're differentiating and talking about things that matter most to our customers, which seems like marketing 101. And that's something that we should all do, as we focus a lot on data and focus a lot on just the top line, bubble line types messages. I think that's something that that we may have lost a little bit. And so we're having a lot more conversation and intention around how do we connect with our customers. Of course, what Kevin said in terms of events, but just in terms of what we're saying, because there's so many people consuming everything digitally. Are we saying things that actually matter to people? And so that's a lot of intention that we're placing in terms of how we continue to connect. And of course, resonate what Kevin said in interesting and creative ways, but just what is it we're trying to say and how do we break through? And does it really matter? Does it really matter what we're saying? And if it doesn't, then let's not say it at all.
And, this is so interesting. And I'm imagining there's some debate, because in theory, you could say something that didn't matter, but it might drive some more clicks. There are these cases where you can be off brand and see data move, and you have to have a North Star like you're describing to help sort of shape it. Otherwise, the story can break.
Yeah.
Okay. Love that. Katrina, how about you? What's on your to-do differently list?
Yeah, I think I might go a little bit more personal on you than Drew for the answer to this one. Always a significant time investment when you start a new role at a new company, right? So that's been a little all-consuming out of necessity to get my head around those things, to make sure that I intentionally kind of rebalance some of where I spend my time, know enough more about the business now and our customers and our products so that I can prioritize for the team a little bit better, and then make sure I prioritize for myself as well.
A little time for Katrina. One of the things that this came up in a huddle, and I thought it was an interesting way, you as a leader, you have a choice of spending time leading marketing, and you have this choice of spending time doing marketing. And I'm wondering if that mix is going to change a little bit at all, Kevin.
Well, if you really like doing marketing and being a marketer, sometimes you take on enough leadership roles that you find yourself not actually doing it all that much anymore. Instead, you're managing budgets and talking with HR and things like that. But to your point, it sounds like what you were getting at was it's that mix of the tactics and just getting out there and doing versus kind of shaping the bigger picture and tone and approach, if I heard you right.
Yeah. And again, I think it's a really tricky balance, because let's face it, if you're leading marketing, the doing part has to be going pretty well for you to sort of take your hand, if you will, away and step away and say, I can spend more time leading, which means, working with the C-suite and building customer relationships and making sure we're the voice of the customer and all those other things. And Mika, you have experience on your plate as well. So I got to believe that you can spend less time in the doing of both of those things.
It's an interesting balance, as Kevin said. I mean, I think that not only because you may like doing marketing, but also I think that making sure that we're driving the impact that we want to drive, often doing the marketing and getting into the weeds in terms of how are we really impacting customers? What exactly are we saying? What exactly are literally the clicks that we want to see customers go through to be able to understand the impact that we're driving? I think we need to, as leaders, understand those details to be able to zoom in a little bit, to be able to zoom out and understand those details and zoom out and to lead. And so with customer experience and with marketing, I have found that I actually am leading better if I find opportune moments and tell the team that this is one of those moments that I'm going to zoom in and do what we do, walk the walls. And it's essentially, tell me about a customer experience. And we schedule them to say, look, if we're going to walk the wall for a launch event, or if we're going to walk the wall for how a customer is going to experience a product. And it is a literal, like, walking through how a customer clicks through, and it helps me get context for what the customer is facing, what the teams are facing in terms of what they have to market. And so I think I am going to actually spend a lot more time and intention on doing the marketing and walking the wall so that I can lead better. So I'm trying to strike that balance, Kevin, like you. But I think I need to index into that detail a little more this year than I had before.
Interesting. Okay. Well, so one of these things we're talking about our habits. And of course, this is the moment when we ask on this show, what would Ben Franklin say? Because that's what we do on this show. We ask that question. And I think he would say, "'Tis easier to prevent bad habits than to break them." So we have to sort of make sure that we don't have any bad habits, because it's really hard to get rid of those other ones. Okay, so now with that, and we're just going to go sweeping past it, I am curious. So there are a couple things that came up in huddles recently. One was doing a meeting audit and getting rid of any meeting that you could. But the other thing that's sort of underlying that was also a MarTech audit. And it's like, can we look at our stack and go, And so I'm curious if any of you did a MarTech audit this year, and if so, did you retire any tools?
Yeah, we haven't been doing a formal MarTech audit so much as it's just something, a constant looking at the different tools. You know, we've implemented a new ABM tool, for example, this year. And, you know, we're experimenting with lots of different ones. I think it's really just being willing to make fast calls on it has been a critical thing for us. It's, you know, make sure you're putting them through their paces and experimenting as much as you can, but don't get too hung up on one particular solution or one particular platform and let that get in the way of the broader strategy. So yeah, I think for us, it's just an ongoing, you know, constant, you know, experiment, but look at the tools, you know, see if there's better ones out there, see if it's actually providing any value into the organization versus, you know, well, we cut a check, so now we got to dig in and waste 6 months just trying to, you know, get value out of that. So I think it's more of an ongoing process for us. If anything, actually this year we've added more tools, just as we've been investing in new areas. So.
Right. Katrina, anything in the audit department?
Yeah, you know, as we've been building out kind of the next iteration and things of growth strategy, you know, you always have to also take a look at what you have that's going to power part of that and help you get there. And MarTech is certainly a key piece of it. And so we've been going through that. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, those of us that have done this many times, to Kevin's point, like you're not really doing like an audit every couple of years. Like you kind of, as part of your planning process, really need to go take a look at those things. And that planning process isn't necessarily an annual thing anymore. It's how do you check in every quarter on what you need and what's working and what's not. And, you know, I think those of us in the marketing chair know all too well, although not everybody else maybe has internalized this learning the same way, is that there are no silver bullets in this space. You know, there is no one magic part of your MarTech stack that's going to make all of your problems go away. It's really the ongoing evolution and innovation that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. Mika, did anything else on the audit? Did you sunset any technology last year?
We didn't sunset anything. We did do an audit, and then we actually put some intention around each one of our technologies and said, look, what is the bar that we want to set for each one of these? What do we want to see for each one? And then now we're putting those intentions to test to make sure we get the best out of them. And then we're opening ourselves up to considering what else is out there, as, you know, as Katrina and Kevin had pointed out. And so we're making sure every quarter we're looking at new vendors so that we're evaluating what else, because it changes so much. Yeah. So we're always evaluating new, but we want to make sure we use what we have well. And so it's a little bit like your closet. Like if you're going to decide to add one, what are you going to take away? Because more isn't necessarily more. So that's sort of the mantra that we're going off of.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that came up in a huddle was that when they did the audit, first of all, they made sure there was somebody that owned the technology, and they realized there were several technology they had that nobody owned. And when nobody owns it, nobody takes responsibility for it. And then they found that there were many technologies they had that were just understaffed. And so they could get a lot out of it, but they weren't getting a lot out of it. So they either had to invest more staff or just, you know, jettison it. Okay. So that's technology. Let's, you know, get on our, you know, magician hats. And we're going to just magically solve it. What marketing challenge would you like to solve in 2022? I'm curious, Kevin, Katrina, anything that you want to solve? You know, God, I wish I could nail this one.
I think maybe Mika had touched on this a little bit earlier, but yeah, for us, it's not about a particular tactic so much as I think like a lot of B2B marketing organizations, we're always wrestling with exactly how do we measure leads generated in the pipeline. And, we've had a pretty traditional MQL model, and as it flows down, but there's always a balance, because it's very easy to set a metric of I want more leads. And then you have a very busy sales force who's also screaming, it's like, okay, that's great, but I only want the top quality leads that are valuable. And it's always that balance between volume and quality, and, not flooding your sales team, but, giving them a really actionable, useful stuff. And so that's probably our biggest thing, is we're going to take a complete relook at our whole pipeline model and lead model, and just understand, are we actually driving towards the right outcomes? Are there better ways to measure that? Can we look at intent and things of that nature? So that's really kind of our big thing to tackle as we look into next year.
I really should set a one-on-one with a fellow huddler on that. They completely revamped their pipeline and jettisoned MQLs completely, like just as a metric, and which is so interesting. But are you still using, Mika? Are you using MQLs?
We are using MQLs. I think the biggest thing I have is somewhat related to Kevin, not necessarily thinking of how do we remove our model, because we're just trying to put a pipeline model in. But really what we're noticing is for every one person that's on an opportunity that a seller would say, yes, that this person is on this SQL, we actually see, 10 to 12 people who engage with us digitally that aren't on the opportunity, but that are actively engaging with us, likely, and our hypothesis is they're influencing the purchase. Right. And so what I'm trying to do is trying to solve for this year is, who's that person that is actually on the opportunity that's making the decision? And then who are those people that are on the periphery that we can see engaging in a lot of our content and attending our webinars, but aren't making the decision? And how do we actually engage with them differently or the same? How do we identify who they are? And then how do we engage with them differently or the same at scale? We can do it in a ABM standpoint if we look at and identify like a core set of, a dozen or several dozen customers. But at scale, how do you identify the group of individuals that are influencers and buyers? And so that's the keys to the kingdom that we're trying to crack this year.
Sounds like a technology. It sounds like a perfect thing for AI to model out, right?
I wish it would.
It does. Okay. Well, speaking of this, let's sort of I'm going to give you all a shot at final words of wisdom, sort of things, whether any resolutions that you want to share or suggest. As we're leaving 2021 behind, we're marching into 2022. What's your final bit of wisdom or inspiration? And I'm going to start with Kevin.
Build a little bit actually off what Mika had said earlier around. I think there's there's a tendency in B2B marketing to assume it's all about appealing to the COO or the CFO in the ultimate financial decision maker, and you lose the emotion. And I do think there's a lot of emotion that can be had. But I think the trick for me and the biggest kind of words of wisdom, if I can share them, would be really around, particularly now, I think as people we're at year 2.5 or whatever of this pandemic, there's all this fatigue, there's all this burnout, there's all this just, general exhaustion out there. And I think that people, whether it's B2C or B2B, they gravitate towards brands that are acknowledging that and helping them address that and helping them solve the real immediate kind of challenges and pain points they're seeing in their lives today, whether it's personal or work. And I do think the brands who can nail that and show that they're helping speak to those challenges and do it in a respectful way without beating people over the head with sales pitches and product, that's the key. And so there's some of that emotion, there's some of that, compassion, but I think, brands who can nail that are going to be the ones who win.
All right, we're going to keep it real. Katrina.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of a personal one, Drew, but it carries over into work as well. So in 2021, I changed companies and made some big shifts from a career standpoint. And it was interesting how many people in my network, it was like one extreme or the other. They were like, oh, this is amazing, I'm so happy for you. Or, are you crazy? Why would you do this now? Have you not been on the same planet with the rest of us for the last year? And, the world has been really crazy and probably will continue to be some version of extraordinarily fluid going forward. But I think it's good to just not let that stop us. You know, don't let the fear of what's going on outside the window slow you down or squash your dreams or hold you back from things that you really want to do. You might have to do it differently than you would have done it a few years ago, let different isn't necessarily bad. Different can still work out just fine. So don't let the fear hold you back.
So we're going to be real. We're going to be bold. Okay. Last tip, Mika.
You know, I always try to think of a theme for the year to come. And this year, I think, or next for 2022, I think it's going to be intention. So it's a bit of a combination between Katrina and Kevin's comments. It's, you know, focusing on the things that matter most, you know, personally and professionally, because if you don't get those right, you can do a ton of things and not do anything. It's a bunch of activity. And so how do we really drive in driving the numbers, there's people at the end of those numbers at the end of that MQL. And so how do we create an emotional connection with those people? And then how do we do so by being bold, to Katrina's point? Like, let's just go big or go home. And so if it's not worth being proud of, if you're not going to do something and say, I'm really proud of this, or this is really bold, then let's just not do it. So it's placing a lot more intention around, you know, what we're going to do professionally and then what I'm going to personally do in my world outside of work.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you. We are going to be intentional and bold and real. Thank you, Katrina, Kevin, and Mika. You guys are great sports. To hear more conversations like this one and submit your own questions while we're live, join us on the next Renegade Marketers Live. We stream to my LinkedIn profile, that's Drew Neiser, every other week. Renegade Marketers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. Audio production is by Sam Beck. Show notes are written by Melissa Caffrey. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins. And intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about my new book and the savviest B2B marketing boutique in New York City, visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.